Hello, welcome to Shelby Radio. I am Shelby Carino, and this is episode number 725. And let's talk about how life will never move until you move. Okay, this is a great topic of conversation today as we are at the end of January, which means we are getting closer to that February 17th, what I call mark of the year of the fire horse. I think it's the fire horse, which is all about movement. Okay. Everything's going to start speeding up. Everything's going to start moving. And as we're coming out of this year of the snake energy and all this shedding that we're doing and working to get things in alignment and move them into place, whether you're conscious to this or not, you're probably doing some shedding, but also installing things that are going to help you move towards what the whole energy is of the horse. Okay. And I'm doing these episodes piggybacking off of what's going on in my life, in my world, when I walked away from teaching in December, right before Christmas break, and how things just began to change and shift in ways that I could never expect or even see until I let one thing go in order to create the vacuum for everything else to come in. So I want to take time in this episode today, not only to reinforce some things I've already said, but to share with you what exactly has shown up in my life since I decided to move. Okay. And I'm sure you'll relate to this in some form or fashion, and we'll move forward with what that's going to be. Okay. So let me just go back in time for a minute. If you have quit your job, resigned from your job, maybe you got laid off from your job, whatever the case may be, when that happens to you, it's not the finish line, okay? The leaving of the job, however it happened, that's never the finish line. It's the handoff to what's next. And a lot of times people miss that because when you're so ingrained in your job, loved your job, maybe you didn't love your job, but you did your job for an extended period of time, and that became your identity because that's what you did every day. That's what your schedule was. When it's no longer there, then it's like, well, what do I do? And this is where I tell people in my psychic energy course, you always want to be planning 3 steps in front of you, okay? Because if not, you get behind the 8 ball when things happen that might not even be in your control, okay? So this is about us being able to know, hey, if we leave something in our lives, whether it's the job or a relationship or a belief system, this can be for anything, okay? That moment in time, that's not the end goal. That's not the finish line. It's just the handoff to what's next. All right? And sometimes when we leave things, we expect instant relief or instant success for whatever it is that's supposed to show up next. And remember, that's not necessarily the case, okay? Because what happens, and what I've been talking about in my experience, is you have a recovery phase because your energy has to adapt to what no longer is. whether it's the job, a relationship, the belief system, the health issue, whatever, there's a recovery phase. And the nervous system, and I spoke about this last week, is the nervous system doesn't necessarily immediately just relax. Okay, it has to learn that it is safe again for whatever safety means to your nervous system. Okay, so for me, I never realized how much my system had powered itself up in order to survive a situation. Okay, and I'm not just talking about my 6-month teaching job. Okay, I'm talking about the last decade of my life where, I have undergone some pretty serious spiritual evolutionary test. Okay. And here also right at the end, the last 2 years, everything I'd gone through with Joe's mother and her death and dying transition, and everything that I have gone through with Joe and our life, raising teenage boys and dealing with ex energies, and just, what I'm saying? Like, even just building my Queen of Total Wellness and creating the curriculum and all the shifts Joe has gone through with his company, and just there, it's a lot. Okay. So my nervous system has powered up really over the last decade, just looking to survive. Okay. And then when I went in and got the job, then it was just more in my face of, oh, wow, this is what I've been doing this whole time with my nervous system. So even though with the job, even though that was aligned in that moment of detour that I had to take in the timing, my body was still paying a price for that detour. And it just so happened my body was paying a higher price because I wasn't in the safety and security of my own home and schedule and timing, and, being able to have time to relax my nervous system before it powered up again. So going into the job and being around people, anywhere from 10 to 12 hours a day being on, that's when I really was like, oh God, what in the world is happening here? This isn't right. This isn't how it's supposed to be. So when I left, and for me, it was leaving the job, it created that vacuum effect. And when I had that vacuum effect, it's really taken me about a month in order for my body to adjust and go into that recovery phase without rushing to fill the gap of that vacuum. However, what ended up happening was things that we already knew we had to put on the back burner. Those things just subtly started showing up. They started showing up in November, okay, over Thanksgiving. And then, that knock at the door just kept happening, which is why that 3 weeks leading up to Christmas, I was just like, oh my gosh. So it was already there, and that future energy had come in. But once I made the decision to quit, I still have had to go through about a month of just, let me calm down, let my nervous system get back on track, even though the vacuum of information is coming in, and we're making action steps towards those, which I'll get into in a second of what's going on. So I didn't just leave a job. Okay. I stepped out of a constant state of readiness. I've got to be on guard. And that's why I also link it to relationships with my clients right now, because I have a lot of clients in relationships, and they're like, I don't know if I'm supposed to be in this relationship. My nervous system's blown out, and so I'm like, okay, I have to work them through the relationship process. Are they supposed to stay with this person? Are they supposed to let it go? Is the season of that done? What is there a new season coming with it? So it's not just the job. It can be anything. Okay. But this is what I also want to kind of reiterate in my experience what recovery actually looks like when you leave something, okay? When you let something go. What I have learned is you kind of get some fatigue, whether it's mental fatigue, emotional fatigue, physical fatigue, spiritual fatigue. After that stress is gone, you just kind of like, I'm tired. I don't have it in me to power up, right? You just want to be. And what's interesting in my story, because I am married and Joe and I share so much of the energies, so I may be going through something, but he feels something different because we balance each other. I noticed that he was getting to a place after I had some recovery that he was taking on some fatigue. And then in his language, he was saying, even though he felt like he wanted to sit around, he wanted to keep moving. He wanted to start living his life. So he even realized, like, wait a minute, even himself has been in this this whirlwind of that death and dying of his mother. And he went through this fatigue process after that situation kind of quit because she died. And then he kind of went through this recovery phase. And then he said to me, a couple weeks ago, when I was going to upgrade my cell phone because it was time and I had broken it several months ago. That's probably the only way I probably would have upgraded it is I dropped it and it shattered, but it still worked somehow. Okay. And so finally the day came and I went, oh, I've got to go upgrade my cell phone. And, I didn't want to do the insurance. I actually wanted a new cell phone. So I don't know why that was important for me to tell you that. But anyway, so, but Joe wanted to go. And that's when he shared with me, even though I feel like I just want to sit on the couch and watch TV, I'm starting to feel like I don't want to miss life. I've missed a lot. I don't want to miss life. I want to get out there and do, even if it was going with me to get my cell phone, you know what I mean? So I thought that was an interesting revelation in his head that there was something new coming back into his awareness, into his grid that, his whole life he's been in survival. Okay. So now that his mom is gone and that big piece that was constantly keeping his nervous system on ready, was gone. And so now he's having all of these realities come to him about how much he hadn't lived his life yet, and so he's like, I don't want to miss anything else, so it's kind of, powered him up in a different way. Okay. Because that contract with his mother is done. So there is this emotional decompression, whether it's the grief that a lot of us are going through or have gone through. It's also relief, that something's done. Okay. Like, oh, finally this is done. And then you go into a state of confusion because you don't really understand yet what happened, even though you do. You know what I mean? So that's that nervous system that is really scanning that psychic energy field of yourself and asking, is it really safe now? Is it safe for me to come out and play? Like, am I going to get bombarded again or, are we good? And so it's just this slowing down of ourselves to never get into that space of that mental urgent behavior that we have to fill the vacuum immediately. Okay, just like calm your jets a minute and let it all ride. And then at the right time, that vacuum, begins to show you what is now coming in next. Okay. So this phase of letting go, this phase of quitting, the life isn't going to move until you move reality is when you leave one thing, when you make the decision to let go of something and leave, like I made the decision to quit, okay, my teaching job. Life was not moving until I made that decision. And I want to clarify, even though things were showing up on the board to show me, hey, life is now wanting you to focus on these things over here because these things were showing up around Thanksgiving, I wasn't ready to move yet. Okay? And so when I made the decision, I need to move, I need to let go of this job, and I went through all of my personal grieving process with that, whatever it was, then I could open up my perspective and go, wow, okay, this is now going to happen. This is going to happen. We have a son. He's got to move. There's these things, like it wasn't just me making the decision to move. Me moving was going to move a lot of people around in my ecology. Okay. What do leaders do in energy? They move first. And that's kind of what I do. I move first, and then, people see that, and then they kind of have encouragement to follow behind, and they move something in their world. It's just kind of what we do. So in that recovery phase after the move, it's never stagnation that you're in. It's a reorganization where the system is reallocating basically that energy that you use to survive your situation. It's now coming back at you, and it's going to give you your creativity back, which is what started happening to me. It's going to give your perceptions, your perspectives back, because you're not in that tunnel vision anymore of the situation or job. You're going to get your decision-making processes coming back on grid differently. You're going to have different opportunities that show up that you start recognizing. Okay. So I had to realize, even with me over the last month or so, that my nervous system was never failing me. Okay. It was just off duty for a minute, and it has felt really good for it to be off duty because I didn't even consciously realize how much it was on duty. Okay. So that's been a very interesting phase and a very appreciative phase that I've been in. And now, as I'm doing this episode with you today, life is actually starting to move again, where now, things have been moving, but now things are becoming more physically in. Does that make sense? Meaning, because the nervous system of myself is no longer in that defense mode, then I can tell in my body I'm not necessarily gripping onto something. I'm not chasing things. I'm not over strategizing things in my world like I used to. So I'm noticing that this energy is available for alignment of the things that I've been needing to do because I'm no longer having to survive. Does that make sense? So this is where things didn't necessarily happen faster in my world. They just lined up a lot cleaner in my world. Okay? And so that's what I was explaining to Joe a few days back is, I left teaching on December 18th, right? I resigned, I think it was the Tuesday after we got back, from Thanksgiving. I put in my resignation, and then my last day was December 18th, but then we went into the Christmas holiday. So my nervous system didn't know that I really wasn't going back to teaching yet until January 5th when everybody went back to teaching but me. I didn't go back that day. So then that's when that recovery phase really started happening. And then that's when I said to Joe, like, just because I quit, I wasn't necessarily expecting things to just flood in because I needed time to adjust. And now I'm seeing where everything is lined up so much easier, so much cleaner because I'm easier, I'm cleaner. Okay. So let me tell you what's happened. All right. Here's some real life examples of my life, of what has occurred and what is now moving into place. Okay. Immediately, when was it? We got back from Fredericksburg on New Year's Day. Okay. January 1st. And then that, second, third. So it was January 4th, which was really the night before technically I would have gone back to work. Okay. It was Sunday night, January 4th, and something just came over me. Joe and I were in the living room. I think we had just gotten back from dinner or something, and he was on the couch and I was sitting in this chair next to him. And I remember I kind of like looked up for a minute, and just out of my mouth, I said, "You need to call your friend," and which is his best friend who owns a marketing company, who had done marketing for his mother. And I said, "You need to call him, and I need you to call him so we all can have a conversation about truly marketing my business, my curriculum, everything. Like, I'm ready." And Joe was just like, "Okay." And I was like, "No, I mean it." Like, it, like, he's like, "I get it." Like, but for me, I was like, "No, I really need this to happen." And of course he texted him, and, the next day, I think it was that Monday, Joe was like, "Okay, hey, are you good to go for this phone call? I'm going to meet you." I think Joe went and met with him on Monday. And then that same day, which was the day I technically would have been back to work, is when I had the conversation via Zoom with the friend and the company. And that's when everything started, rolling. Okay. And that's when a decision was made that we were going to hire his company to take me to the next level with everything. And that moved into the next set of Zoom meetings that had to occur with other people in the company, filling out a plethora of information about my brand and business and all of the things so they could, get a really good scope of who I am and what I want and what's going to happen and all the things. Because then it was going to take some time before they reach back out and we have another meeting and, here's what we're looking at and, here's how we're doing, all the things, right, for marketing. And so I knew, because that was all said and done and that lined up literally on the day I technically would have gone back to work, that became my new job. My job that I claimed, again, was the Queen of Total Wellness, because I didn't do anything with it for over 6 months when I went back to work in the school system. I didn't have time. Okay. I was lucky just to even get my podcast recorded. Okay. But my energy wasn't in my business. And then once that decision was made, then other things started happening. I started getting calls again through Keen, that I'm on their site. If y'all know who I am, you follow me. Okay. The calls started coming in again on Keen. I was getting email submissions again to from my website. I was getting emails in again that were wanting to be guest on my podcast, and I don't do guest on my podcast right now, but and then I was getting other questions about my YouTube channel. So this stream of information of people that I didn't know noticing me, or people starting to look at my reels that hadn't, seen me before. Like, there was just this wave of things that started flowing in that told me I made the right decision about professionally hiring a marketing firm to take my brand to the next level and get the information out there, because these things were starting to flow in about people wanting information. And I'm a teacher, so I want people to have this information. Okay. So these conversations began flowing. There was no pushing that had to happen. Okay. The labor was already done. Okay. So the right people began to appear. They still are appearing. I was beginning to have clarity without having to really force a strategy in my head. It was just the Pisces in me was just like, oh, this is amazing. So those decisions that I was making felt obvious to me. Like, yeah, this is just obvious. This needs to happen. Okay. Like, it wasn't stressful at all. It was just like, yeah, this is it. This is how it needs to go. And it was that part of me that I had been missing for so long. And it just felt so good to be like, yes, my intuition is right. It's kinesthetically flowing through my body. My nervous system is regulating. The communications are clearer. And everything is just resonating so much better. Like, it was just like, this is how it's supposed to be. Okay. So that was the big thing that showed up for me. And of course it was going to go straight into my queen of total wellness, because that's everything I represent, right? That's the nuts and bolts of a 17 plus year spiritual awakening process that I'm now really ready to be seen on a global level in a bigger fashion, because my nervous system and my psychic energy and all of those things are ready for the exposure. Okay. Whereas before I was detouring, right? Like, I detoured off into teaching again. I was still picking up my parts. So that's why you never judge a detour, because you may get the most expansive part of yourself in the detour, and that's kind of what happened to me. So now, that's all moving forward. Well, as that has moved forward, Joe and I, over Christmas, I think it was, I forgot when we did it. But we booked our trip again to Isla Mujeres in Mexico. If you've never heard of Isla Mujeres, oh my God, it's amazing. The whole island is like 4.7 miles from tip to tip. And it is the island of women, or the mother island. And it's this Mayan goddess, Ixchel, that women would come to the island and would gift goddess Ixchel gifts, for fertility or abundance, or, whatever, the mother brings. And so there's just this vibe on the island in Punta Sur where they have the statues and all the history of, what occurred there. But the island is beautiful. And Joe and I were there several years ago, and we, for the last 2 years, booked our trip to go back. And each booking we did, we had to cancel because of things that happened with his mother. So we literally were on lockdown for like 2 years. And so now that she's crossed over, then we were like, oh my gosh, we can finally go back, because we've been trying to go back, and now we're going, and we're going for like 11 days. And so we're excited about it, because we're like, it's long overdue. Okay. So that was something that showed up that we were able to book out and do in the timing that we had been trying to do it the last 2 years. And then from that, something in me opened up about travel, where my energy's ready to really travel again. It's really ready to be expansive again. Because remember, I was shrink wrapping my energy so much. So then I knew my energy was going to have to get used to traveling again, like literally getting on a plane and traveling. So how did I start working those pieces of energies? Well, I started, one, I upgraded my cell phone. I upgraded my communications. That changed everything. From there, I began looking at wanting a new purse, because I've been wanting a new purse for over 2 years. Okay. And that moved into, well, let me learn how to travel safely without having to have a purse on my shoulder. Let me look at sling bag purses. Let me look at putting a backpack on instead of carrying a purse and bag through the airport like I used to do, So I noticed I started looking to make my travel easier with my purses. And with women, oh, hold on. Joe texted. I just had to answer this. If you're watching me on my YouTube channel, that's what I just did. And I had to pause. Okay. So, and I even said to Joe, I said, I am down this rabbit hole of changing my wallet, changing purses, changing how I want to travel easier through the airport. And I just don't, and I even said to him, I was like, I'm tired of carrying things on my shoulders. Like I don't, on that one purse on my shoulder, and it gets heavy. Like a backpack is different. A sling is different, because, you're holding it different in the body. So I literally was going through this process of, I don't want anything on my shoulders. Like I'm literally letting go of things on my shoulders. Okay. And then I even went down this rabbit hole on Amazon where, if you didn't know, of course, on the back of your cell phone now, if I have an iPhone, I have an iPhone 17 Pro Max, right? But the iPhones now have these magnets on the back of them. And so now, I didn't know if you know this, but there's these wallets that like attach, magnetize to the back of the phone. Actually, I have it over here if you're watching me on my YouTube channel. But yeah, so I didn't even know these existed. Okay. And these are little wallets. I'm showing it to you on camera on YouTube. And you can see the roundness there, and it just magnetizes, see, to your phone. Like, look at that. And then if you're going out somewhere and it has the RIFD protectors, like, so people can't really scan your cards or whatever. But yeah, you can just put stuff in there. So I started noticing in my life that, and I haven't put anything in it yet, but I started noticing in my life that I was getting tired of carrying my purse. I was tired of having a normal size wallet, because I always carried my checkbook in my wallet. And I'm like, I don't even use my checkbook. Like, why am I carrying it with me everywhere? Like, why am I carrying all this stuff? And it was just going through my purse. So I started noticing, like, when Joe and I go out and do things, like when we go and look at campers and RVs, and I'm carrying my purse around, and I'm just like, I just want to be hands-free, right? So I used about a week of my time last week to really look at these sling bags and backpacks, and I ordered them. So, like, oops, I actually ordered them if you want to see them. Again, if you're watching me on my YouTube channel. But yeah, so I ordered this bag, And no, I don't sponsor any of these. Okay, but this is the Baglini sling bag that I bought. And it's really cool because it's protective. So these things hook, and if someone tried to, the strap is knife resistant. Like, who knew? So even if you're wearing this and somebody had a knife and they tried to cut it off of you, it's knife resistant. Like, who knew this was even a thing? Okay, even like you're just not going to get slashed. So anyway, yeah, I ordered this for travel, and then I got this backpack that I like, can hold the drinks and my iPad and everything. And so this is more or less what I'm going to, take on the plane and things of that nature. It's water resistant, whatever, because I know we're going to start doing a lot more traveling. And so I just, carrying the traditional purse, and that's the only purse I ever carry, I was like, I need to move away from that. So I started noticing, okay, for a woman, I'm really reorganizing something in my brain that has to do with money. I realized Independent Financial changed to South State Bank, okay, here in Texas. And, well, when it shifted over, I didn't update my PIN on my debit card. So I literally blocked myself from being able to get cash out anytime I was at the store. And I was just so inundated with work. It was not even on my list to be like, oh, I need to, update my PIN so I can get cash out. And so that was something that I fixed. I, called the bank and got my PIN number activated, and when I went to the store a couple days later, I actually got cash out, and I told Joe, I said, well, I must be on grid again because look, I have cash in my wallet. You know what I mean? And then, I ordered a smaller wallet, just to put in the backpack if I don't want to use that one, that's on my phone or whatever. So it's like I've been doing all of these things that have to do with money, organization, communications. The purse is very significant to women because you carry your personal things in there. And I've really been reorganizing in my mind, what's important for me to carry. And then I got to a place of, what do I want to take to Isla Mujeres in Mexico? I remember on some of our trips, if we went to the bathroom, there wasn't toilet paper, or, you had to pay. Not kidding. I think we were in, oh God, I forgot what part of Mexico we were in, but I had to pay for toilet paper. And then you got like this little square, right? Now, we didn't have that problem in Isla Mujeres, but you always want to have like wipes with you, okay? So, because you just never know. So I've learned, okay, always carry wipes that you can like wipe your ass, okay, if you ever need to, or your, hands, or, whatever. So like I ordered some of these travel wipes, or I mean, I just went down this whole rabbit hole of morphing everything together for our trip, to the point that last week I even put out my suitcase and carry-on luggage that I'm going to take, the luggage that I'm going to check, and then the one that's going to go on the plane. And then I told Joe, I said, hey, you've got about 24 to 48 hours to get yours out and put it next to mine in the hallway here. And he was like, okay. And I was like, because I got to start moving us towards the airplane, towards traveling, because things are starting to show up. And again, I work from the future back. So I prepare us for the trip before we ever get to the trip. So that way, anything that needs to show up will show up before we get there. And that way, when we get there, we have this amazing time because we've handled everything in the energies, prior to that. So that's where everything started flowing for me. Okay. The clarity was coming. I wasn't having to force a strategy of anything. The decisions were easy. And I was getting back into, like last week, I made my sourdough bread, and I made chocolate chip sourdough cookies. Okay. So I got my starter out from the fridge and I fed it and I made bread. And because that's been a goal of mine, is to make bread, if not every week, at least every 2 weeks, so I can use the starter and put good healthy bread back into the house instead of everything you buy at the store. Okay. So that was just kind of one of my things. And then of course I've been doing, my Pilates. So, but the other night, this was last Wednesday. Okay, it was last Wednesday. It was Wednesday night, but it was really Wednesday day. I had this feeling that we needed to revisit this couple of franchise opportunities that Joe and I have been talking about for the last several years. Okay. And I told him, I said, hey, it is time that we talk about this franchise. Like, we need to have this conversation now. Like, it's time. Okay. And I didn't really feel like he was going to be the one to move into action. So that night, because it was on me all day last Wednesday and I knew it was coming because we have had these conversations, I went online. I submitted the form to this franchise, and literally it was like a generated email response back and with a Calendly link to book the call to speak about owning the franchise. And it happened in less than 10 minutes. And I told Joe, I said, hey, what day? And they didn't have anything available until February. So I said, what day, do you want? Because the only available times are when we're in East Limo Harris. And he was like, well, let's do it when we're in East Limo Harris. So on, February 5th, we have a Zoom meeting, to discuss owning this franchise, which I'll talk about the actual franchise later. But, we're going down now and having these conversations, right? And so that happened within 10 minutes. It just lined up. Okay. We didn't have to think about it. I submitted the form for this other franchise that I've always said to Joe, I'm going to open up and we're going to own this franchise. So I submitted that same night. Well, the next morning I had someone, the same person, call from that franchise, text message from that franchise, and wanted to have a conversation. Well, I texted them back and they said, well, for efficiency purposes, where do you want this franchise to be? I told them my top several locations and they gave me information about what was going on with those locations and about this other location I hadn't even considered yet, that down the road that they're probably going to put something in, which was kind of matching with our timeline. And I was just like, great. And so I've developed already this relationship and communication with the business development person that has all of this in our portfolio. So when those locations, hit on the grid, then, they're going to let us know. And so all of that happened in literally, honestly, less than 14 hours. So now this one franchise we've been talking about forever and this other franchise we've been talking about forever collided at the right time. And now these conversations are moving forward, which means all the rest that has to come in to make that build out process happen, or that movement in that direction happen, whatever that may mean. Okay. But it's the next step, which is what I knew was showing up in November when I really had to make that decision to leave, because these businesses were going to show up, because that energy was already poking at me around Thanksgiving. Okay. But I didn't do anything with it in December, and I just did something with it last week. Okay. Because then it was like kinesthetically shouting at me, handle this, Shelby, handle this. And I was like, okay. And then that shifted it for Joe. So none of this was rushed and nor was it reactive, okay? All of it came from a grounded place. I could feel into these opportunities that were now ready to take flight. There was nothing to prove. There was no, oh, I can't do this because, there's pressure, right? It was just, let's explore it. Now is the time. Okay. So when you're regulated in that nervous system and you can assess these opportunities that show up instead of escaping into something else, then you get traction, right? Because again, you'll never move your life until you move your life. So also within all of this, we've had his mother's house on the market even when she was alive. Okay. And it was on the market for like 9 months. And of course the market's been bad and it didn't sell. But there was this glitch that was kind of keeping it from selling. And it's in a really good area and it's a really good house. And well, now this long-standing stagnation with her house has moved. We actually went in and remodeled her house and it just got done last week. The realtor, is coming back and taking the pictures because he's ready to list it again because things are starting to change. But there's no chaos. There's no drama. There's no energetic dragging that's going on because that moment of us being in that survival energy let go. The logistics of everything followed. We were able to, put money into the house, to get it modernized, which will bring in more money for the house. And if that was the intention for the house, we couldn't do that when his mother was alive because she had all of these other people talking in her ear. And so, now that's probably why it didn't sell. And now we were able to go in and better the house, better it for the next people, close out more of that energy of, her in that house. And now it's like fresh and new and it's moving forward. So that happened literally in less than a month. What we couldn't get done in 9 months. Because we were constantly getting blocked, because his mother kept bringing people in to block it. And then now that she's removed, the block is undone. And now we're moving with the house, the higher intention of the house. So that happened. And it was just like, oh, what a relief. And it didn't take weeks and weeks and weeks. Okay. It took a couple of weeks and it's done. And like I said, us traveling to Isla Mujeres for 11 days, that's an integration. There's no escaping. We're actually integrating from the first time that we went. I talked about that 2-time learning pattern. Well, we're going back to Isla Mujeres now a second time. So there's going to be other information in that integration that shows up. So for me, my system has finally had space to receive excitement and pleasure. And I've even told Joe, I'm so excited about the trip. It's like we get to be teenagers again, because we've done all the work and we're ready for the pleasure. Even though when we went before it was pleasurable, we were still doing a lot of spiritual movement. Okay. So I've reminded myself that nervous systems are never healing when we're in the thought processes. They're healing through the experiences that we're having. And now we're elevating our experiences more pleasurably for ourselves because we've done the service of that work. Okay? And then the icing on top of the cake is when I made this decision to quit, and our son who follows in our wake, well, things in his life began to shift, and he's 23. So his timing began aligning with what our family unit system was doing because we were starting to relax. So movement began happening for him organically. There wasn't pressure. There was no control. There was just this momentum that began building. And when I realized that my nervous system was stabilizing, which meant Joe's was stabilizing, well, then it began freeing our son as well and freeing him. So now he's got this great opportunity where he's, shifting jobs. He gets to move to another state, which we're thrilled about because he gets to explore something new, and he's getting more money. He's going to get the, what I call the experiences that he needs for this other thing that he's building for himself. And it's just, it's like, wow. And it's just all happening simultaneously, organically, with all of us coming together in a new way. And that's how I know, again, I made the right decision when I quit, when I left, when I let go of what was holding back, what was now ready to show up. Okay. Even though my ego had to adjust. All right. So people think that sometimes when you let go of something or you quit something, that you're going to create chaos. But if you've done a lot of work, you're not creating the chaos because you front loaded. Hopefully you're learning that in my psychic energy course, but you're front loading your experiences. So when you do make these elevated shifts, then they're coming in with that alignment. Okay. Because chaos usually only shows up when the nervous system hasn't been able to recover. So if we're in the year of the horse, which is all about movement and new beginnings, if you have not pre-programmed and pre-psychically planned, as I call it, your experiences, well, then it might show up as chaos. And now would be a good time to jump into my curriculum, okay? Or schedule a call with me to even go through where your energy is right now and what would be the most beneficial for you to begin with so that chaos is managed more appropriately, all right? Because if you do rush into something, you're just recreating the same pressure. So you're not closing the loop. You're just recreating chaos you've already recreated or you've done before. And then that's when you miss the moment to be in the alignment. You miss the window of timing to be in the alignment. So with our son, because I knew I was going through all of this, which meant Joe was going through a lot of stuff, then I knew it was going to get to our son. So when our son reached out and he was like, hey, this opportunity just presented itself, I wasn't necessarily surprised. So what I did is I went into not necessarily mom mode. I went into psychic mode because he's very, very psychic. And I'm still his female that helps him line things up. So when that showed up, I went, okay, let's work this backwards so you don't miss anything. And I started, putting in the pieces that he needed in order to run that through so he could come to his own decision about what he wanted to do. And I just helped in the energy line up the experiences so he could get a full perspective of what felt right to him kinesthetically, because that's how I knew he was going to make his decision. And I told him, there is a window of time. And if you don't match that window of time, you miss the energy. And I put that into his unconscious part to create a fear to get him to move, because just like us, he had been in such a grounded space for several years. He didn't remember what it was like to feel that, get up and go, life's moving again. So I put all that in there for him. And then when he went to the state to look at apartments and things of that nature, he even, reached out and said, this has just been effortless. Like, it's just falling into place. And of course, I giggled and I said to myself, well, of course it has, like, I mean, I helped you line it up. Like, we're not doing, we're not making this difficult. We've all been through too much to make this difficult. Like, no. So, because I knew how important it was for him to probably take this opportunity. So I lined it up and he fell right on into it, which is what told me, yeah, it's exactly where he needs to be. So now he's moving on to the next phase of, having to get the movers and, how we're all going to do this and, alongside him because he wants us to be a part of it. So that's a really cool place to be, with others in your ecology. Okay. So as I'm closing this up, I just want to reiterate that there are signs when you're in that recovery phase into the alignment phase. The first thing is you stop obsessively planning. Week 2, okay, after, when I was done with the second week of school being in session and I wasn't there, I said to Joe, I have to stop tasking. I'm done with tasking, because for 6 months, that's all I'd been doing was planning. Most of teaching is planning, tasking. And that's what I did for the first 2 weeks. So I noticed I was moving from recovery into that third week of alignment because I was not obsessively trying to make things happen and plan it. Okay. Then I realized, okay, well, things are showing up and I'm not having to go look for it. The conversations are easy. The decisions are neutral. They're not charged conversations. They're just matter of fact. This is what it is. And, bada boom, bada bing, here we go. And I feel available to the information instead of trying to make something happen and feel desperate that doesn't need to happen. You know what I mean? It's just like, well, of course this is happening. Of course this is what's supposed to be next. So again, if you're someone who has just quit your job, left your job and you didn't want to leave your job, or left a relationship or a belief system, or you're moving, or, something is exiting your world and all of this is resonating with you, then just be where you're at now. Never rush being quiet. Never label you being at rest as not being productive or you're failing at something, and clearly do not panic if you're off at first. Okay? Because sometimes the most productive thing you can do for you, that nervous system of yours, is to stop bracing and planning. Just take a small little hiatus of a few days, a few weeks, because the life that you're waiting for is never going to show up until your body believes that it's safe again to show up. And that's what I have learned. That's what I have adjusted to in this experience of mine of quitting a job and taking that detour to pick up parts of myself that I didn't even realize I was going to do, to then now have this experience that I'm having to now truly catapult not just me, but Joe and our son and people around us into other experiences in life to begin building truly what we're here to build, and not just survive in a matrix of a check. That's not what we're here to do. Some people are, but not if you're listening to my podcast, okay? If you're listening to my podcast, you're not here to just live in the matrix and take a check the rest of your life and die. Like, no, you're here to build. You're here to do something more, okay? So I'm going to leave it at that. And I'm really excited about how you receive this information for yourself and where those bells and whistles go off for you, because we're all in this together somewhere in the collective, and we're all writing this energy into the year of the horse that technically makes its transition February 17th. All right. So until then, have a great day. I'll be back in next week for the episode. I am going to pre-record that in a couple of days because obviously I'm going to be in Mexico on the day that, I would air it. So, but I'm going to get that done when I get to a place of seeing what information needs to be with that, and we'll just go from there. So until then, have a good one, and I'll be back same time, same place next week. Take care.